Hi, everybody. That was mildly enthusiastic. I always like to ask for a little enthusiasm at the beginning. How's everybody doing tonight? Thank you for being here. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Aiden Flax-Clark, and I'm part of the team that brings you live from NYPL, so I am especially delighted to see all of your beautiful faces tonight. And tonight I get to introduce this event, and I also have the good fortune to moderate it, and we have a lot to get to. 100 years ago, a Lebanese-born writer and artist named Kahlil Gibran published what is arguably one of the most famous books ever written, The Prophet. It has never gone out of print. It has been translated into roughly all of the languages. It has sold copies in the millions and millions, and it has charmed, bedazzled, and bedeviled readers since the day it was published. And interestingly, I learned, has never been advertised except very briefly in 1923, which makes it an even more remarkable bestseller. It has many famous fans. There are all kinds of lists that float around out there. My favorite is that Elvis Presley was a huge fan of The Prophet. He apparently gave away thousands of copies of this book, and I read could quote it by memory anywhere in the book as commanded. I don't believe that. I don't. But, you know, who am I to say? Although I guess I just did. But you're going to hear a lot more about the book tonight, particularly from my colleague, Hiba Abid, who is the library's, give it up for Hiba. We're all here because this was Hiba's idea, so we owe her a huge debt of gratitude. It has been absolutely wonderful to collaborate with her on this event, and she's going to come up in just a minute to tell you a little bit more about some of our collections, about Gibran, about Arab Americans in New York. It's really wonderful. And hopefully you all got a chance to see the display that she curated outside, yeah? Great. I love the more clapping, the better. Keep it up. If you didn't see it, it will be up after the event, so you can still check it out. It's really wonderful. Now, on the less good news, you probably all heard that Tony Shalhoub could not be with us tonight. At the last minute, Tony was not able to make it. He was extremely sorry to miss this. Tony, as I'm sure you know, is of Lebanese heritage, and at one point was even trying to make a biopic about Kahlil Gibran, so I gathered that this was an extremely personal event for him. He even selected his favorite passage to read from the book. We were really grateful that he had agreed to do it, and again, he really wanted all of you to know how sorry he was to miss being here with you tonight. Luckily for us, here at the library, there are usually just a few brilliant writers and poets kind of kicking around, you know, in different corners doing their brilliant work. And we have the great fortune that one of those brilliant writers, Yasmin Seal, a poet and translator, has graciously offered to fill in and do Tony's selected reading tonight. So we're really grateful to Yasmin for coming in. Give it up for Yasmin Seal. She's here working on a translation of the 1001 Nights or the Arabian Nights, and I, for one, cannot wait to read it. We're also, of course, joined by novelist, story writer, and memoirist Randa Jarrar, who, give it up for Randa. I really admire her writing. We're just so grateful that she's here with us tonight. You can find Randa and Hiba's bios in your program. If you're watching online, it's on the event listing. Now, I'm sure as you listen, you will have some questions for all of tonight's speakers. Hopefully you all got some note cards when you came in, yes? Okay, it sounds like a yes. Well, anyway, if you didn't get one, I'm sure there's some more outside. Please write down your question at any time. Some of my colleagues will come by to pick them up. If you're watching online, you can put your question in the chat, or you can email publicprograms@nypl.org. Wherever you are, we really want to hear from you. Okay, Live from NYPL is made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Ispahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos, and of course by all of you who are here with us tonight. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for being here. And keep that clapping going. Let's give it up for Hiba Abid.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very happy to see such a packed room to celebrate Gibran, but also Arab American writing in New York, in the United States, and Arab writing in general. So I'll give you a few words of introduction before we gather there and have a conversation about Gibran and the Syrian American community in New York. So if you have spent time browsing the library's research collections, you may already know that we have here, in this very building, a handwritten copy of the American Declaration of Independence. Or perhaps you've heard of about one of only 2 copies in the world of a first-year printing of Candide de l'Optimisme by Voltaire, or the Lenox Globe, which bears on it one of the oldest depictions, representations of this continent. All of these are incredible treasures, which is why they are rightfully items showcased in our aptly named exhibition, Treasures, just above the auditorium where we're sitting right now. But there are many other secret treasures in this building, and I have the good fortune to watch over some of those incredible items, which I'm here to tell you about tonight. As the curator for Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies, I'm the steward for a diverse array of materials that includes Islamic manuscripts from the 9th to the 19th centuries, artist books made by modern and contemporary artists from the Middle East and the diasporas in the US and in Europe. We have pamphlets from the Arab world and much more. Among the materials I watch over and also collect is a rich and layered collection of Arab American materials documenting the vibrant history of Arabic speakers and writers in New York City. And tonight, in celebration of Kahlil Gibran, who is one of the best-known members of this literary history in the world, the United States, and indeed New York, I would like to offer glimpses into the Arabic literary history of New York that our collections can offer. The history of these collections actually goes back almost to the very beginning of the library's history in 1895. In 1897, so only 2 years after the library was born, a German-born Jewish philanthropist, Jacob Schiff, gave the library a visionary gift. Schiff, for those who don't know him, in his lifetime helped fund, among other things, the Henry Street settlements, the Library of Congress, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and the Tuskegee Institute, and offered the New York Public Library a gift of $10,000 for the purchase of Semitic literature. This gift, worth almost $400,000 in today's dollars, made it possible for the New York Public Library to open a reading room then on the 2nd floor that was dedicated to the reading and study of all Semitic literature, Hebrew and Arabic, and many other languages besides. In that room, patrons could request and use Arabic, Persian, Ottoman manuscript masterpieces, 19th century lithographs from Lucknow or from Tehran in Iran, photographs of Cairo, newspapers in Arabic, in Persian, in Ottoman, music sheets and Arab vinyl records as well. As the library's curator for Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies, I'm here before you as a part of that legacy that continues 126 years later. This incredibly diverse and oftentimes unique collection steadily grew, and by 1912, the head of what was then called the Oriental Division, Richard Gottheil, proudly proclaimed in a library bulletin that they had to expand out of their original space because the room was, I quote, really crowded. And in fact, they had to add 2 chairs to accommodate those readers and patrons coming to the Oriental Division. Gottheil also noted the increasing number of, I quote, Syrian and Armenian patrons calling for books and periodicals in their own languages, and they seem to take pride in showing the collections to their friends, end of quote. Those Syrians who were frequently mentioned in the library's bulletins formed an integral part of the first Arabic-speaking community in New York City. Many first emigrated around 1880 from Ottoman-ruled Greater Syria, which, for those who don't know, is an area which at that time encompassed the historical lands of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Palestine. These refugees and exiles were escaping economic and political crisis in Beirut, Mount Lebanon, and Damascus, for example, the civil war between Maronite Christians and the Druze, or the economic boom pushing some to seek employment outside the region. They were drawn by the opportunities offered in the United States that they learned about in American missionary schools in Lebanon and Syria. And for many of these immigrants, the trip here entailed a 3-week journey by ship that took them from the Eastern Mediterranean onto Marseille and Le Havre in France, where some settled, and finally to this country. Upon their arrival in New York, Syrians, majority of them belonging to the Christian faith, made their new home near Battery Park, specifically around Washington Street on the Lower West Side of Manhattan. Many chose to continue their journey to other states, Michigan and Massachusetts, while others ventured to Latin America, where vibrant Syrian communities flourished in Buenos Aires, in Sao Paulo, and Mexico City. New York City's Syrian quarters, also called Little Syria, or the Syrian colony, or the mother colony, thrived between the 1880s and 1940s. In order to support their families, men as well as women, rejecting traditional gender expectations, peddled goods, worked in factories or in stores. Later, they were able to open their own restaurants and grocery stores. They attended their own churches and pressed Arab records. Newly founded publishing houses began printing the first Arabic language newspapers, literary magazines, and books that circulated everywhere in the United States. And not only. Among this population, there were also writers, poets, journalists, and artists, part of the broader Romanticism literary movement of Arabic-speaking émigrés called the Mahjar. In 1916, some of them formed a literary society called the Pen League, or Al-Rabita Al-Qalamiyya. Among their founding members were legendary writers, Nasib Arida, Abdel Masih Haddad, Nadra Haddad, Amin Rihani, and Kahlil Gibran. So I love imagining Gibran, or one of his friends from the Pen League, among those users that Richard Gottheil, the head of the Oriental Division, mentioned, sitting here in this building, just a few floors above us, leafing through the Arabic periodicals and books from their distant homelands, reading among their fellow immigrants together here in the Western Hemisphere. In their writings, members of the Pen League recorded their migration experiences and pondered their newly hybrid identities. They wrestled with their integration efforts into American culture, as well as the feeling of separation from their Arab homelands. Others recounted the daily lives of ordinary people in the bustling heart of Little Syria. Stimulated by their personal encounter with Western literature, they challenged the rigidity of what they considered the rigidity of Arab literary traditions and radically changed the Arabic language, which ultimately magnified the Nahda movement, or the Arab literary and cultural renaissance movement that flourished from the second half of the 19th century and the early 20th century. They wrote variously in Arabic and in English in order to reach a broader audience, while also bringing European and Eastern European literature to Arabic-speaking readers and immigrant communities across the United States through their translations of those works into Arabic. As a result, the brilliant productions of the Pen League were not only read in the United States, but also across the Americas and the Arab world, establishing New York City as a prominent intellectual and cultural center of Arab life, with influence that traveled a fair bit beyond Washington Street. Kahlil Gibran was one of the most prominent members of the Pen League, today, of course, best known around the world as the author of The Prophet. The poet, philosopher, artist, and writer was born in 1883 in Jarrar, present-day Lebanon. He and his family immigrated to the United States in 1895, and it was here, first in Boston, but mostly in New York, that he created most of his literary works and his drawings and painting. And I hope you saw some of them outside the room displayed. In poetry and prose, in Arabic and English, Gibran, in his many books, explored themes of hybrid identity, of love and spirituality. His mystical style, developed over many years, arguably culminated in The Prophet, which was published in English in 1923 by Alfred Knopf. And in fact, he was the second Arab-American writer to publish a book in English after Amin Rihani's The Book of Khalid, which was published in 1911. Gibran, much like his companions, broke with the rigid conventions of traditional Arabic poetry and literary prose and combined Eastern and Western philosophies with Jungian psychology, and the result was a book that resonated with millions of readers across time and cultures. As Aidan earlier said, in the century since it was first published, it has never gone out of print. It has been translated into more than 100 languages, has sold over 100 million copies, and is likely sitting on your bookshelf at home right now. Gibran's collected works is also one of the library's top checkouts of all time in Arabic. Gibran, in a way, was born from a rejection of the Arabic canon, and he expanded its boundaries. Doing so gave generation of Arab writers after him the courage to confront the conventions of that canon and to seek new routes for dynamism and vitality in literature, and particularly poetry. The Gibranic style, which I would characterize as direct, free, simple, and contemplative, allowed for the rise of the modernist movement and experimentations such as the Arabic free verse movement of the late 1940s or the surrealist movement to which belonged poets like Adonis. Generations of Arab writers and poets continue to write in Arabic or English in America and as Americans, magnifying Arab literature while contributing to the American intellectual and cultural history. You can see in the works of Etel Adnan, Sinan Antoun, Adonis, and other new generations of Arab American writers, who we have here tonight, poets and artists, the legacy of Gibran and his companions. All of those writers, those yet to come, will continue to find a home among the collections at the New York Public Library. Today, we want to celebrate the incredible moment of Little Syria and the Mahjar literature, or diasporic literature, in Arab and American history, as well as the remarkable individuals who shaped and continue to shape the Arabic literary history of New York, the United States, and the Middle East. Some of the authors, like Gibran, made New York their home. Others passed by or spent a few years in the city. They created a New York in Arabic and English, while also documenting its creation in novels, poems, and newspapers. Thank you very much for your attention, and let's... Let's now welcome Yasmin Seal for a reading. Thank you.
I apologize for not being Tony Shalhoub, but I'm glad to be able to step in and read to you the short chapter on children from the Prophet. And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us of children." And he said, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer seeks the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. For even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable.
Can we have one more round of applause for Hiba and Yasmin? That was truly fascinating, Hiba. Thank you so much. And Randa, thank you so much for being here as well. And I want to start asking you actually about the passage that Yasmin just read. Selfishly, I have 2 little kids. I really love that passage. It really speaks to me. And you have a kid who's not a kid anymore. So I wonder, you know, being a parent on the other side of childhood, how does that passage strike you?
It's just so, can everyone hear me okay? No?
Let's see.
Don't silence the one Palestinian on stage. What am I, Rashida Tlaib? Okay. Yeah, it's a really great passage for parents and for people who were once children to just be reminded of how we really don't own our children, that our children don't actually belong to us. And speaking of kids, my son was really looking forward to pitching Tony his idea for T-shirts. I think it was he said it would say, show boobs for shell hoobs. So.
You know that this is totally not relevant, but his brother, I recall hearing him say in an interview, also has a play on his family's name in a product, which is a dog pooper scooper called the Shapoopy.
Amazing.
So your son's like on the right track.
Absolutely right. These are all just, you know, brilliant Arab innovations. We're just good at language. It's what we do.
So I wonder if I can read a couple passages from the book to get some responses from both of you. Would that be all right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also for any of you who haven't read the book. It'll give you a little taste of what the prophet sounds like. And for any of you who don't know, the basic outline is that there's a prophet who is leaving a city, and as he's leaving, everyone there comes out and says, no, you can't go yet. And then a seeress named Almitra comes out and asks for him to deliver some wisdom, which he does in these sort of 26 aphoristic chapters. So I'm going to start with a particular section that I'm selfishly interested in because I'm married. Then Almitra spoke again and said, "And what of marriage, master?" And he answered, saying, "You were born together, and together you shall be forevermore. You shall be together when the white wings of death scatter your days. Aye, you shall be together even in the silent memory of God, but let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Sing and dance together, and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone."
I heard this part on marriage at a wedding. They eventually get divorced. But I do agree with what he says, that space is important, keeping your own individuality in marriage and in any type of union. But I remember as a teenager, when I read that passage, it really struck me, and I couldn't agree more. But it's fascinating that this passage I even heard people in the audience near the display saying, "Oh, I read this at my wedding." I think it's a very successful one, and I understand why.
Yeah. I think it's also kind of in conversation with Rilke's idea of partnership, which is that the best partner you can have, especially as a poet or a writer, is someone who will guard your solitude. So I think Gibran and Rilke are kind of touching on the same thing there.
Huh. Yeah, and it strikes me that he was never married, and sounds like he was not good at relationships. And so it makes the wisdom all the more impressive.
Well, it's the prophet giving the wisdom, not
Fair.
Gibran. Yeah.
But what's interesting is, one of his patrons, a female patron, Josephine Peabody, I think, who he met in Boston, was the first one to call him the prophet. So somehow, I think there is a kind of a parallel between the Al-Mustafa and the prophet and the figure, Gibran himself. So I don't know if he's sometimes kind of professing himself as a prophet. But that's also interesting, the presence of female figures in his life throughout his life. There were many women who were starting by his mother, and then 3 major women who were by his side.
Yeah, his sister, right? And then
Yes,
and his patron.
Yes, Josephine and Mary Haskell. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mary Haskell has a reputation, I assume kind of unfairly, as having helped him write English. You know, just stealing some of the credit from him and giving it to a white person. Just the first time that's ever happened.
Yeah. That's weird.
First and only time.
Yeah. I don't know if I believe it.
Now, this next passage, what's wild about this is that I just thought of doing this right before the event, and I was asking Randa and Hiba if it was okay if we did this, and Randa was like, yeah, I highlighted some passages. Can I show them to you? And they were exactly this passage, so we're on the same wavelength today. So this is the section on crime and punishment, and he says, oftentimes have I heard you speak of one who commits a wrong as though he were not one of you, but a stranger unto you and an intruder upon your world. But I say that even as the holy and the righteous cannot rise beyond the highest, which is in each one of you, so the wicked and the weak cannot fall lower than the lowest, which is in you also. So the wrongdoer cannot do wrong without the hidden will of you all. And it jumps a page, he says, you cannot separate the just from the unjust, and the good from the wicked, for they stand together before the face of the sun, even as the black thread and the white are woven together. So why did you highlight that passage, Randa?
I would love it if you continued reading.
I will.
Because right after that, there's the reason.
Okay. And when the black thread breaks, the weaver shall look into the whole cloth, and he shall examine the loom also.
Yeah. I think with everything that's going on in the world now, I just really believe that instead of kind of dehumanizing each other and kind of trying to find someone to blame or something to blame, it might behoove us, to listen to the prophet and think about the loom, or rather the machinery, if you will, that is kind of truly responsible, rather than kind of thinking about individual responsibility. Or maybe we can also mention what Audre Lorde says about the master's tools, right? Not being able to be freed by using the master's tools. But what I love about this section is it also talks about how it's the loom itself and the kind of terrifying darkness and structures that exist that keep all of us from being liberated. That's actually what we should be looking at, and what we should be questioning, and what we should be working to dismantle, so that we can live in a world where we're all liberated, where we all live in peace, and where our children who don't belong to us stop calling to ask for money. I mean, it's just like the Venmo requests, they don't stop. But anyway, yeah, that's why I love that section.
Because he prophesied Venmo.
He prophesied it, yeah.
How does it strike you, Hiba?
I didn't underline that passage.
Well, that's one of the things about this book, right? Is that there are bits that jump out differently to people. And I mean, it's so opaque in ways that, one passage will speak volumes to someone.
Absolutely.
And, will speak nothing to somebody else.
Yeah. I'm going to be boring. I actually really love the children's passage because, first, my parents are here and they came from Tunisia. And I'm sorry that I have to go back to the children's chapter, but it's something that I think when we emigrate, we always, especially from Arab families and Middle Eastern, Mediterranean families, we always struggle with that separation. And I always try to think of how did my parents do to let me go, to let us go, thousands of miles away. and given us this freedom. And I think, did they read the Prophet, or is just some kind of wisdom that they had? And it's interesting. I mean, I agree with you when you say that it speaks to so many people, because somehow in this book, and this is probably why the reception was kind of unbalanced. Some said, "Oh, Gibran is just a very sentimentalist, a kind of a didactic sentimentalist." But maybe because he probably originally written it in Arabic, and it comes from a Gibran who was born in Lebanon with somehow, I mean, Eastern Christian culture, and I think it resonates well if it was written in Arabic, and it would have. I think it speaks a lot to an Arab or Middle Eastern reader, and maybe the result in English can sound a bit, a kind of universalism that is a bit naive, but I would definitely hear it in Arabic and say, "Oh, this is so strong and powerful." And I think the effect in English is quite different. But yeah, I do think it's universal, and I understand why it speaks to so many people.
Well, I will say, as a person who's only encountered it in English, it speaks a lot to me, and I think it's not pat sentiment at all. I mean, anyone who's raised little kids and been around other parents has seen parents who think that they can mold their child in their image, and then watch them fail and feel very badly about what's happened, And again, it strikes me that he was a guy who didn't have kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he was once a kid. I think that's a big part of like being parented by West Asian and North African people is a very unique type of thing. Everybody who's gone through that knows that, right? It's the love is so immense, but so is the fear. There's so much fear, especially those of us whose parents immigrated. They're just fearful. They love us, and they just don't want us to be hurt. And they came from lands where maybe it wasn't a given that one's child makes it, just with, that fear that you see. It's also very common in the maternal grief of Black women and Black mothers in this country, the ways that I've read the fear and the worry for their children in a world that, in police states and places where those children are dehumanized or seen as adults already when they aren't, or seen as a threat when they're just merely existing. So I think that this is also his way. He was, running around New York, trying to be a writer, trying to accomplish something. But there's something in this book that really speaks to the yearning that the immigrant has for the old country, or for a time when you really feel like you belong. And so it kind of makes sense that he didn't have kids, right? He's like, can you actually have your kids be of you, have them come through you, and then just sort of watch them make their own mistakes and learn? I mean, that's the most terrifying thing as a parent, is realizing that your kid is going to fail and make mistakes, and that's actually how they're going to grow. And you want to step in and be like, no, you're gonna get a DUI. It's gonna take 2 years to fix that. It's gonna suck so bad. And only when you, as in me, are in a car outside of your dentist's office, when you've had Novocaine, and the DUI means that you have to blow into this thing, and that's how your car's gonna start. But your mouth can't make its way around the and you're just, and you're FaceTiming your son, and you say, I know you are of me, and you just came through me, but dude, I can't get my car started now. It all just, to me, it all comes full circle, even though it's 100 years old.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Really, a lot of research,
I mean, you were just, all that was just hypothetical, right? Like,
no, it didn't actually happen,
Can I ask you both when you first came across this book and how it struck you at that time?
again, I think when I was a teenager, and then I read it, and I started. Then I moved from Tunisia to France, and I was a broke student, and so every time, at every birthday, I would just buy Gibran and offer it to people as if it was a unique book that people didn't know about. So no, it struck me pretty well. But before even knowing the Prophet and before reading, as a kid, I didn't know that I was listening to Gibran's words. I don't know if some of you in the room know "Atini Ya Warani," the song by Fayrouz, "Bring Me the Flute and Sing." And this is these are so Fayrouz is one of the best, the most famous Lebanese and Arab singer. She's still alive. She's the second sort of Kulthum for Arabs, and this song is actually from a poem by Gibran, Al-Mawakib, which is outside. We have the first edition at the library, and it's displayed outside. And it's this conversation between an old sage and a young man at the edge of a forest, and they talk about life and nature and spirituality, etc. And every time the young man answers the old sage, he starts by a refrain saying, "Give me the flute and sing, Atina ya warani." And this song is one of the most famous songs, I think, in the Arab world, and that's how I knew later that it was Gibran, but I didn't know it then. And it's an amazing song. Yeah, and I recommend listening to it. There is a cover by a Mexican Canadian singer called Lassa de Sela, and it's also she's saying it in Arabic, and it's very beautiful.
Are they both on Spotify?
Yes. No, Lassa de Sela, it was a one. She died a few years ago from breast cancer, but the video is on YouTube.
Okay.
But the Fayrouz one is on Spotify.
But you should do the YouTube to see the video, for sure.
Yeah.
Is the video good?
I mean, probably. It's Fayrouz. You know? Yeah.
So, Randa, we spoke last week, and you were telling me that when you first encountered this book, you kind of wrote it off as like a sort of annoying piece of new age whatever that white hippies were into.
Yeah, I was in Connecticut at a friend's, in a friend's bedroom as a teenager, and I had moved to the States probably 3 years before this happened, and I instantly was drawn to the words Kahlil Gibran on her bookshelf, and I thought, oh my God, this person like reads Arabic literature, and so I picked it up and I opened it and I just started kind of reading it and being like, when does the book start? Like, what's happening? This guy's just talking? Like, what, you know? And so I asked her, like, where did you get this book? And she said, that book, it's my dad's. You know, he gave it to me. He wants me to read it. He gave it to me when I turned 16. I won't read it. And her dad was just this, like, gorgeous, badass Jewish man who was an ad exec, and from what I could tell, like, you know, very successful person. And I, you know, as like a young immigrant person, I was like, yeah, but if your dad thinks you should read it, you know, like, it's probably good. So in my mind, I was like, no, I should read that one day. But every time I tried picking it up, I would be annoyed by, it's as a fiction writer, like by its lack of kind of structure, story structure or whatever. And then just realizing much later, you know, in the last 20 years, especially Arab American writers are constantly saying, we are post-Gibran, you know, like why aren't our books being bestsellers, and what is happening? Why don't people read us now? Like, why are we always interesting 100 years after our books come out? And so for a long time, I also just rejected it because of that. So this event just kind of gives me this full circle experience of being a teenager and coming to New York Public Library and trying to read things by Arab American writers and not finding much. But this book existed, right? So that's kind of a very complicated answer, but the experience I have with it is also complicated. So.
Yeah, and I feel like, well, I should side note mention this is my Jewish parents' copy that they gave me when I was a teenager that I brought here with us tonight. Although I realized my mom stole it from her friend and she has to admit it to her.
Amazing.
But I feel like more than maybe any writer I can think of, but certainly one of the most is he's so judged by his audience, and there's so many different interpretations of him. There's what Hiba was saying earlier, that he was kind of like this stylistic innovator that pioneered changing Arabic writing, but also that he was like sort of vapid, new age claptrap, I didn't really have a question. I just was kind of...
No, but that's a good point. And actually, Randa, when you were saying, why is this, Gibran is having all this recognition and just one every century, one Arab writer every century is having this recognition. I think also part of this event and this celebration is also to bring more light into the whole community. I mean, his companions, all the members of the Pen League and the Literary Society, and not only in the people who made this the Syrian community in New York that most people maybe don't know, and even the geography, in the urbanism of the city, the traces, there are barely no traces of the Syrian neighborhood in the Lower West side of Manhattan. So. We're talking a lot about Gibran, but it's also a way of talking about first him, that maybe many people don't know that he's an Arab writer, and also to be able to talk about other writers and poets who were part of this circle.
Who are some of the other writers and poets that you think people should know more about?
Well, as I said earlier, Amin Rihani is a poet and a writer, and he's the first one who published a book in English, the Book of Khalid, and it's a book about the story of two young Syrian peddlers in New York, and they are exposed to all this new life and modernity, or if we want to call it modernity, here in New York, and then they decide to go back to their homelands and to change things and to become revolutionaries in their countries. So there is Amin Rihani, Elia Boumadi, an amazing poet who, as opposed to Gibran, who didn't have a proper training in Arabic, so this is why he wrote a lot in English. He actually learned or had a formal training in Arabic later after he came to Boston. Then he went back to Lebanon, and then he studied Arabic. But Elia Boumadi had a strong training in Arabic, and he wrote a lot in Arabic, a lot of incredible poetry. Elia Boumadi, Nasib Arida, Amin Rihani are all writers who are also translated, either wrote in English or were translated, and I really recommend reading them. And there are also women, Afifa Karam, who was an incredible advocate for feminism and women's rights, not only within the Arab community, but also she was also very critical of women's rights in the United States. And she wrote 3 novels. And there were many women who were writers and journalists at that time.
Randa, are there other writers, Arab American writers, either of that period or later on, that you feel people are missing out on?
Yeah, not that period, but since then, D.H. Melhem was a writer in New York, and she wrote novels about being Lebanese in New York, and she was very good friends with Gwendolyn Brooks, who is an incredible poet and writer, obviously. And then after that, there are writers like Hayyan Sharara, who lived in New York for a long time, and he's written 4 beautiful books of poetry. Suhair Hamed, who was a performance poet, but also has several books of poetry, such as Zatar Diva and Breaking Poems. And, the Pen League might not exist anymore, but the Radius of Arab American Writers exists, or RAWI for short. And it's a huge organization that has had just so much influence and supports writing by West Asian and North African people, or Arabs, if you will. And it's been around, I think, for at least 30 years. So it's the new version of the Pen League, I guess.
I love that. Thank you. And maybe we can stay on that theme for a second. We're starting to get some questions from the audience, which we'll turn to in a second. But you know, like you said, Hiba, part of the reason that we're having this event is to talk about these incredible collections that you steward, that a lot of people don't know are here. And you've talked a little bit about what some of those collections are, but can you tell us more? What are the types of writers we'll find, types of materials, and how would people access them? I mean, we have to do a commercial, you know, for.
Absolutely, I'm on commercial mode right now. So, as I said earlier, the New York Public Library has one of the oldest collection of the Middle East and North Africa and Southeast Asia. And so we have amazing Arab American collections. But so is it a question to specifically to talk about Arab American or everything we have, or kind of spotlights on what we have?
I vote for you to take it however you think would be best.
I don't know if you know that we have also manuscripts. We have an amazing collection of manuscripts from Ottoman, Persian, North African, Iraqi manuscripts at the library. We have incredible prints as well, so Arab American collections, but also an incredible collection of prints and books, pamphlets from Egypt from the late 19th and early 20th century. And many of them revolve popular entertainment, music, theater plays, some that are very unique because they were maybe printed and they circulated while they were banned by the British rule in Egypt. So that's also something I highly encourage you to come and discover. We have, as I said, photographs and artist books, zines, and we still continue. We are collecting, and I'm collecting these contemporary productions from the Middle East, from the diasporas here in the US and in Europe. And so if you want to access these, we have our online catalog. But we also have LibGuides that are valuable resources that can help you navigate some specific subjects or collections. But you can also reach out to me directly or to the reference librarians who can then forward your requests to me directly, and we can meet anytime. And you as well, Randa. We spoke and we said that we will meet afterwards, so you can find what you were looking for a few years ago when you came. I don't know, when was that exactly?
Oh, it was 30 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you about that, Randa? Because so we all spoke on the phone last week, and you kind of mentioned this, but Randa was talking about coming to New York when you were 30 years younger, I gather, and trying to find Arab American literature and finding some, but not a ton. And I just wonder what it would mean to the young you to have a Hiba.
Oh my God.
To be able to access that now.
It would mean everything. I mean, that's kind of what we talk about when we talk about representation, right? If you look in the mirror and you don't see anything, right, you tend to internalize that maybe you are monstrous, or you tend to internalize this idea of otherness. But if you see, giant collections of things by people whose names sound like yours, or whose mother tongue is the same as yours, then it makes all the difference in the world, I think. And I remember it was tough because back then I would try to go to Columbia and I would try to go to NYU to find these books, but you had to have an ID card to get in. It was difficult to get into these libraries. But coming to the New York Public Library, you could come in and you could look and you could search, and it just it would have made such a huge difference to find something other than like one or two books that I couldn't really connect to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can add also, this year was extremely instructive to me. It's only my second year in New York, and my first year as a curator for Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies. And I met with so many writers from the diasporas, or very recent immigrants, writers, creatives, artists, and that also helps me a lot to curate the collection and to collect things that make sense as well. and people like you and many others who are in the room tonight. So we really care, and that's a very important point to keep in mind, to have a collection that is reflective of the contemporary scene and not only looking towards the past. I mean, we're looking towards the past, but we have to be, in the present and promoting that.
Yeah. Ideally, we're managing to live in the past and the present all at once, and somehow
that's
that
the magic
gets us to
of
the
a
future.
library.
Yeah. And free and open to the public, like Randa pointed out. And everyone has a library card, right? Yes? Okay. I often threaten at the beginning of events to come find you if you don't, so I may still do that.
It's really easy to get one online if you don't have one. So
This is a good commercial. We should keep this going. We should get like an infomercial. We could be like the Ron Popeil of library infomercials. What do you think?
it depends. My price is high.
All right, well, we'll talk later. I'm going to turn to a couple audience questions. And this first one I'm going to read, but I want to add a little bit to it, if that's all right. So the question says, how can spiritual wisdom heal the wounds of those in the heat of war? And I think that's a great question, but I think it's also worth adding to it a particular spin of Gibran, which is that part of what makes him so appealing, I think, to so many people is that he has this incredibly universalist point of view. He was raised a Christian, but was quite influenced by Sufi writing. He talked a lot in his letters and his, poetry and elsewhere about wanting to get to sort of, I don't know if he would have put it this way, but sort of deeper universal truths, that kind of go past religion. And I feel like that's probably what appeals to a lot of people, and yet, obviously, it's a message that a lot of people have a hard time hearing. So again, the question is about how spiritual wisdom can heal the wounds of people in war, but also how do you think they might hear that universalist message in that healing, if it's possible?
I think the best spiritual wisdom speaks truth to power and mobilizes people to, to end wars, basically. I think that one thing that Gibran in this particular book does is it gives us an idea of how to not get into that situation to begin with, right? What happened? At what point did people forget that we are just all one? Hate to sound cheesy, but this is really it. We're all human beings. We all deserve justice, peace, to live in liberation, to see our kids grow up, to see our elders through to their final days, to put them to rest in a way that is dignified. We all just want the same things. And so I think what spiritual wisdom at its core can really accomplish is, instead of healing the wounds, it's kind of like getting there before the wound occurs or even deepens. But yeah, that's my perspective on it.
I'm very bad at talking about spirituality.
I'm right there with you. We can go to another question. Now, this question is a great question, which is, can you please contextualize the Prophet within Gibran's other work? But I'm going to stipulate that probably none of us is an expert on Kahlil Gibran. So do you feel comfortable having some sense of that?
Yeah, more or less. Gibran started writing in Boston, actually. He started writing columns, poetry for a newspaper based in New York called El Muhajir, The Immigrant. And that was, and before that he actually wrote an essay on music called El Musiqa. And that was nurtured by, his friends in Boston, especially, I think Fred Hollanday, this photographer, avant-garde photographer, who became his patron and kind of mentor, Gibran's mentor, and who exposed him to Western music. And so Gibran went on and wrote this essay on Middle Eastern Lebanese music as well as Western music. And then after that, he started writing in Arabic. And The Prophet came many years later. He finished it in 1919, and you have a few copies outside with a history of how The Prophet came to life. So he started writing it in 1919, and as I said, apparently in Arabic first, and then translated it into English. So that's just a hypothesis. We're not sure. I mean, I am not sure of this. And it was published by Alfred Knopf, who, before The Prophet, started already publishing Gibran's books in English, which is interesting because Knopf, I mean, I don't understand exactly what pushed Knopf to publish an Arab Lebanese writer in New York, because that was the only experiment, and Gibran was probably the only writer who had this success, while other Arab writers in New York relied on their own networks, their own publishing houses, their own newspapers to write their poetry, the serialized poetry or short stories. So that, yeah, I don't recall if the success was immediate or a bit later. Maybe you know, Aidan, of the Prophet. I think it was pretty fast after that.
I think it was pretty fast. I don't think it was like right away, but
yes,
given the 100-year span, it was like within the year.
Yes, and there was volume 2 and volume 3 to the Prophet, but the volume 3 never made it. I think he just wrote a line of it, and he died pretty early, pretty young. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and side note, we have the company records of Alfred A. Knopf here. So, although I guess a little bit after he started publishing Gibran,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know much about Knopf until I started preparing for this, but they started off as this sort of very serious publisher of international literature, and didn't come to Americans until kind of a few years in, I think. So
yeah. And again, I don't know if this is a legend that was communicated to me, and I keep on saying it to everyone, but
keep it going.
but you can, receive it as it is. So again, I think Knopf was very reluctant to publish Gibran, but Gibran was a very good friend with Knopf's wife, and they were drinking together in bars and having, enjoying the New York life, and she convinced her husband to publish Knopf. So that's, again, or maybe it's the narrative that we get from the story,
Yeah, it wasn't for a long time easy to be published as an Arab American writer. My first novel, it took 4 years to find a publisher. I had a very, very patient agent who was doing that work, and
is it getting easier now?
It depends on what you're writing. But generally, it wasn't until very recently. It was not easy.
So I'm going to take moderator's privilege and ask one last question. And I was shuffling through my papers to find the quote. Speaking of the Pen League and another commercial for the library and some of the collections you stored, I found a bunch of incredibly interesting books about Gibran here in this building, including a sort of curious biography that his friend Mikhail Naimi wrote. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his name, who is part of the Pen League, where he mostly seems to talk about himself. But he says, and I don't have the quote, so forgive me, but he says something to the effect of, the style of The Prophet is probably going to wear out, but the essence of the book is going to endure. And I'm just curious how you both feel about that.
I think the reason why he says this is because The Prophet was never really, I mean, it was, but it should be put into context of writing of emigres and diasporic writing. So we consider Gibran as maybe an American writer because he writes in English, so we don't put him into perspective. But I think it's important to take all of the aspects of his culture and what he's experienced and what he was exposed to and where he comes from. And then I think that the Prophet would be understood a bit well, or not considered as this, as I say, naive treatise on love and humanity, etc. Yeah.
I can see the idea that stylistically, one could find it too sentimental or cheesy or whatever. But the essence of it is that it's a book about, immigrating, going to a new place. And in the book itself, one of the reasons I think it became so successful is there's no real naming of real countries. People are given these names that are kind of, that they're probably people of color, but it's all very palatable, right? It's just very like, we can listen to this person because he's wise or whatever that is. But it's ultimately about an immigrant who comes, and because he's not from or of the world that he's in, he's able to critique and find all of these wise things to say about the world. And then the book takes place on the eve of him leaving. He's just kind of waiting for his ship to come. So it's because he's leaving this place that he's visiting that he's able to give all this wisdom and then take off and be safe, really, right? So you leave the wisdom, you're like, y'all are fucked up in these several ways, and then you leave because then you can be safe, right? And that's really part of the essence, right? It's many other things, this book, but at its core, a lot of it is that there is a kind of palatability in presenting this wisdom in this way, in calling this woman Al-Mitra, in kind of like just having these people be sort of nameless. And so it's interesting to see a book about someone who also had to leave and leave so much behind. In some ways, this becomes kind of a fantasy of going home. Or it could be a fantasy of going home initially, right, moving home, seeing what everything's wrong with home, and then thinking, I'm immigrating again because y'all are fucked up, right? So it's like these multiple layers of how we are in community, what we encourage each other to do, to remain kind of curious, speak to us of love, speak to us of compassion, instead of shut the fuck up, you're a terrorist, right? Like, no, truly, that's something that we really need to think about right now. It's important. So many people that I love fear for their lives right now, and it's just not cool. And if you think about how Gibran would, see this time or talk about it, I'm sure he would still use, it's his style to speak in platitudes or to speak in ways that are universal or humanize everyone. And it's something that I wish, other structures in our world can borrow from. Like, what if the media did that, right? What if people in power did that? Ultimately, this book, I think, is about the power of people, of just everyday people, and the ways that we can remain in touch with our humanity while still calling for, justice, for what's fair, for what's right, and doing that with love, and finding ways to do that with love, or not, and then just being like, bye, and taking off on his ship.
Well, yes, give it up. I really couldn't think of a better way to close things out. So, Randa, Hiba, thank you so much. Yasmin, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
And copies of The Prophet are for sale outside, of course, as well as Randa's memoir. So please, if you're able, pick them both up. And thank you again for coming.
Can I just say one last thing?
Oh,
there will be an artwork inaugurated next year to celebrate the Pen League in the Syrian community of New York in Elizabeth Garden Plaza, and that was organized by the Washington Street Historical Society. So you will finally have an artwork that will promote and celebrate this community. Thank you so much for coming, and enjoy the work outside.
Thank you. amazing. You were amazing. Thank you. It's very hot up here. It's very hot up here.
That's why I wore this. I was like, it's gonna be hot.
I know. I should have like